Come and join me as we dive into the world of careers, uncovering the reality behind the job titles you've always wondered about and how you can chart your path to success. Whether you're starting out or dreaming of a new role, I'm here to guide you. Real talk, real jobs, real insight, providing career clarity, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Work Uncovered.
Hi, I'm Terry Homans, career consultant and founder of Curated Careers. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Paula about all things cybersecurity. Paula is a cybersecurity professional and the security operations manager at Cyber Audit Team, where she leads technical teams in protecting organisations from digital threats and data breaches. A 2025 awardee of merit at the Gold Coast Women in Business Awards, Paula was also named the 2025 AusCert Diversity and Inclusion Champion and the 2024 Best Security Mentor. She is a prominent leader in the Australian cybersecurity community, serving as the Gold Coast chapter lead for the Australian Women in Security Network and a coordinator for both Sec Talks Gold Coast and B-Sides Gold Coast. Paula specialises in translating complex digital risks into practical safety strategies, focusing on real-world challenges of keeping information secure. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here today as my first woman guest.
Excellent.
Before we dive in, I just wanted to read a little bit of data. So cybersecurity is consistently ranked as one of the top 3 to 5 most in-demand emerging professions globally. So with network and cybersecurity skills projected as the second fastest growing skill category through to 2030. Obviously, we're seeing these rising sophisticated threats, so demand is skyrocketing, and the estimate is that we would need 30,000 new professionals in Australia alone by the end of this year. So that's some pretty interesting statistics, I think, and another reason why I'm so excited to have somebody in your field joining us today. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of this role. You can't avoid it these days. But how would you describe to listeners what it is that you actually do?
Okay, so I think most people probably think it's a bit like the Matrix with weird code on the screen. And I think there's also a misconception that it's the hacker in the hoodie or something very programming centric. And it's none of those things. My specific role is quite diverse. So day to day, no day looks like any other. It's all very different all the time. So from anywhere from customer engagement, report writing, analyzing data, resolving remediations in when I'm in a vulnerability, perhaps in an application stored on a laptop, managing my team. There's just like 1,001 things to do. So it's an excellent career for somebody that likes variety, I would say.
So not much to do then for you. It's a pretty chill job.
So boring.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Okay, so what did you do straight after school? And did your career follow some sort of straight linear pattern, or did you take some detours and diverts along the way?
It was an interesting one because I had done, obviously, not a sort of a younger demographic. For those of you maybe only been listening, I'm sort of early 50s. So when I left school, I knew I had a real passion for technology, but I actually wanted to join the police force. But there was 2 stoppers. The first was that I was too young. And I think the minimum entry age at that point was, 19 or 20. And the second issue I had was at the time they had quite strict height requirements and I was also too short. So I thought, well, what else can I do? So taking on some very wise wisdom words from my mum, she said, well, you've done well with computing at school. Why don't you go to Polytech, which is like a TAFE here in Australia, and do business computing? So I thought, okay. So I did what was then a national diploma in business computing, and I had 2 choices: programming or what they call technical. I chose technical. And I ended up in a classroom with, I think anywhere from about 14 to 30 people, depending on the class, and I was the only woman in the room. I was also a lot younger because I was the only one that had come straight from high school, and most of my fellow students at the time were retraining into other careers, with technology kind of being on people's radar at this point. So this was in the 90s. So Windows 95 was only just coming out, so it was something that people were just really starting to understand that this was really going to happen in businesses. So I did a couple of years there, and then I actually managed to find a part-time job at the Polytech Library. And you might think, oh, library, where's the connection? Well, library is also about finding information, and so this is also the advent of early people getting connectivity to the internet. So I was working in the evenings as a library assistant, helping people with issuing books and bits and pieces, but they chose technology students because they'd just opened a computer lab. And it was a very fortuitous situation because I then managed to secure a full-time role after my 2 years, actually in a university library in the IT department. And I worked there for several years, finding that it was a really wonderful, engaging career. I was given a lot of opportunities through the library. In the library also, when you think about it, libraries can often skew to quite predominantly women. So I never felt that I was the odd one out until I went to the computer science department, and there was the old guys with beards, and I'd go to some of their sessions, and I'm like the testosterone overload in the room. So my career progressed. I was there a few years. I jumped then to managed IT services. And I was extremely lucky. I ended up with the most fantastic company in NZ. I was there 17 years, worked my way up from junior engineer at the time, right up to security or solutions architect, with a big, strong focus on security. And then I thought, it's too cold. I don't like living here. Where else can I live that I'm not going to sit and freeze every day? And I thought, well, Australia, Gold Coast, obviously, a lot of Kiwis come here on holiday. So in 2016, we basically packed up everything we had, sold everything we had, and took a bit of a leap of faith with no jobs and moved to Australia. I was very lucky. I managed to secure a new job in about 4 weeks. I think I applied for 3 and got the second one I applied for. And I started at a managed services provider here on the Gold Coast. And I was really surprised because at that time, even though it was a very reputable company, customers were getting ransomware, and there was like no mail filtering. And so I had come from a organization where we did all that and had done that for years, and suddenly into an organization where that wasn't really at the forefront of their thoughts. After a couple of years, I ended up actually jumping then to one of our customers and becoming the IT manager there, where I was sort of involved with digital transformation of the organization, who'd always done things in certain ways, and were very hard pressed to move into the 1990s, let alone the 2020s. And I was there several years, and unfortunately that company went into liquidation. And I then, through connections I'd made there, I ended up jumping into my current role in cybersecurity. And that was a bit of a change because I'm very happy and confident with the technology, but cybersecurity is not always about technology. It's about the people, the process, and the technology. And so trying to understand that my reliance on technology is not the answer to every solution when it comes to cybersecurity was a very hard thing for me to learn. And I think that's where people sometimes fall over, because they think that cybersecurity is an IT problem, and it's not. It's like workplace health and safety. It's a whole of business risk. And that's what it's about. It's minimizing the risk to an organization.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I imagine many people would have thought the opposite, which is it is just all about the technology. Apart from the technical skills then, because obviously that's just an evolution of the role, what skills did you build in those early roles that helped you move up into where you are now?
Well, I think one of the interesting things I found, and it took me an extraordinarily long time to realize, that the innate skills within myself around being people focused, and also very good at things like communications, and I'm very much a person that does follow process and procedure. So things like documentation and making sure things are finished and followed up on, all things that I just do innately. A lot of my colleagues did not find the same thing. They would focus on the technology and the technology alone, and often that would leave gaps. So what I found was I very quickly became the glue in the project team. I was the one that could work with the customers and translate those technical situations from the nerds in the team. And I say that with full respect. But take those product specialist challenges or issues that they needed to communicate to the customer and actually translate that into words that a customer, for the most part, would understand. I don't always get it right because I am too a nerd, but realizing then that those skills that I found just easy because they're part of me were actually really hard-won skills and things that I could develop. So a lot of those sort of soft skills and my emotional intelligence has really played into my successful career, and also building relationships with people. Actually getting to know the customers, finding out what makes their business tick, what's important to them, because that helps you then gather more information to help do a better job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've touched on quite a few points there that I'm really interested in. Every guest that I've had on here has talked about their core skill is communication and being able to, deal with people. Can you tell me then what this role involves now that maybe is different to when you first started? Because you're not new to it. You've been doing it for quite some time. Has that changed? Has that evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first obviously was in IT type roles, it was a lot of my printer doesn't work. How can I fix this thing? I don't know how to do this in Word. And a lot of it along the way, obviously, is technology change as well. So making sure people were comfortable with different technology changes, a lot of upgrading of operating systems and migration of systems. So my role now does not involve any of that. I don't do any support service desk type work. It's the work I do now is instead of reactive, it's very proactive, going and deliberately looking for problems and gaps and fixing them before that they can be exploited. So it's actually quite a pivot in terms of the way that you approach the work, particularly in my role, doing what they call security engineering and blue teaming. You've got all these cybersecurity words, but basically implementing protections before they can be exploited. I think too, I've realized that, and it happened quite early in my career, but realizing that even IT is not about the technology. It's also about the relationships with people. And I always used to say that my role was always 50% technology, 50% people. And I would say probably the same for the most part now is still true. It's still 50% for me and my role around security, but it's also 50% about working with people, making them constant backwards and forwards with customers, explaining different things. Why are we doing this particular security hardening? Why are we recommending that they do this? Jumping on a call with a customer and explaining a concept, or helping them to understand so they can articulate that to either their colleagues or their directors or whoever else it is within the business. And so those people skills are probably the most important thing. You can absolutely teach somebody about the technology. You can help somebody understand what the process is to follow, but teaching somebody communication skills can be a bit of a challenge. That needs to be something that most people that comes naturally. You can learn it, but it's a bit of a hard skill to learn.
Yep. I'm pleased you brought that up because finally we are seeing that those, and I've probably said it on this show before, I don't really love the term soft skills because it implies that they're a bit less than or not as important. And I think they are absolutely vital. And thankfully now industry, whatever industry you're in, people are starting to actually take that on board and employing the person rather than the skill, because you can teach many skills, but you can't necessarily teach those innate abilities and those types of things. And also too, because you mentioned how important the relationship and building and the people skills are, because I imagine a lot of people who may be initially drawn to this type of field might think, I'm not really a people person, but I'm really good with technology. And then maybe coming unstuck or just not understanding that that's a whole other level that they maybe hadn't considered. So I'm really pleased that you have mentioned that. I wanted to ask what takes up more of your time than people realize. So already we're getting a picture that it's not just all about the technology. But in terms of, and I know there's no average day for you, right? That's like how long is a piece of string? But But what does take up the majority of your time, would you say, in this role that we're at now?
I would say email and report writing or reading reports and writing reports. So understanding when people say, what tool should I learn to use for cybersecurity? It's like Microsoft Office, Outlook, Word, Excel. Those are the core tools I use every day. Yes, I've got a whole bunch of security tooling, but that's a very small component. I might go in and perhaps extract some data, but then I'm going to drop it into Excel to be able to analyze it. I might be writing an email to a customer, and yes, nowadays we use a large language model or AI or whatever you want to call it to finesse the email, but the core of that still has to be what I've written. Likewise with documents, you've got to make sure that they're correct and they're readable and they sound like a human wrote them rather than a machine. And always critiquing. I do a lot of continuous improvement around things, and that can be in lots of different areas, but always looking to try and make something better all the time. That's constant. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how could I do this in a way that resonates more with the customer? What would benefit them? How can we improve this internal process? So I spend a lot of time doing that. I would say whether that's a particular thing I'm doing, it's probably more around on top of each and every task. It's how can I do this better next time?
You talked about what drew you to this, but was there any one thing, I guess, was it necessity that brought you into cybersecurity as such, or was there something that just really sparked an interest and you went, oh, I'm going to go that direction?
I have never really and I've said this to people before, they often talk about their 5-year plan and their career goals. I've never really done that. I've seen opportunities come up and I think, geez, that looks fun. And for me, I have to love the place I work and the job I'm doing. And so what that job and role looks like, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm enjoying doing it. My last role was very different. There was a security element to it, but a lot of my job was just helping the CEO with whatever it was she needed to do. It was all kind of technology focused, but I was fully happy to go and work out how to do something in a technology I wasn't really familiar with. And I learned a lot from that process, but it really didn't matter. If she wanted me to go and check the post from the post from the letterbox, I could go do that too, because I just enjoyed working there and who I was working with. But I think you have to find satisfaction in your role, whatever that is. And I think I was saying to one of my colleagues this morning, it's more around liking and the people that I work with, making sure that I feel that I'm making a difference and that I can really have an impact on our customers in a really positive way. And it's sometimes nice to get a thank you as well, because a lot of these roles, particularly in the technology sector, nobody notices if things are running well.
They notice when it doesn't, though.
They sure do. And it's like, how do we articulate to our customers all the great stuff that's happening in the background when, as far as they've seen, nothing happened because there was no data breach? That's some of the challenges that we face in this industry, and because they think that, oh, we're paying a lot of money for this, but what are we getting? So being able to actually articulate that is because of all the work that's going on in the background behind the scenes.
That's tricky with those jobs, isn't it? Where when nothing happens, that means you've done your job well.
Exactly right. Well, how about
it's really hard to measure that. Well, we did all these things, but we can't measure it because nothing happened. You've raised some other really valid
I turn it all off.
that I love when people mention. One is satisfaction and that purpose in that role. Because sometimes we very often, I think, in our society are sort of led to believe that you have to be doing something complex or really meaningful, or that, affects a lot of people for it to be of value or of purpose to you. But you could drive the garbage truck and that could be purposeful and meaningful for you. So,
100%.
And then the other one is when you talked about environment and the people you work with, I wholeheartedly agree with that, because people generally don't ever leave a job. They leave the environment. It's the environment that's not working for them, not necessarily the job. So I really like that you brought up those 2 points. Did your expectations of this industry or this work live up to what you thought they would? Or did it look different?
I think one of the things that's always surprised me is how few women I've come across in these roles. IT and security are both such fantastically interesting and diverse roles. There is, though, the flip side of that is some workplaces are not particularly open and welcoming to women. So it's a double-edged sword because you want women to come into this industry, but then there's so many factors that force them out. And that can be just toxic workplaces. It can be conditions that are not conducive to being particularly friendly to women, particularly those who have caring responsibilities. But finding an organization, the right one, and being given opportunities, the job is so interesting. If you like solving puzzles, if you like pretty much anything to do with people or technology or process, there's a role in it for you. When I speak to some of other people in the industry, nobody's job looks like anybody else's. Cybersecurity is just so broad. More so, I think, that possibly than technology, because there are so many different facets and nuances of it. And each and every one of those is interesting, and you can be as specific or as broad as you like within that. And it's finding the right place for you.
Again, you've raised something really interesting there that I wanted to highlight. You talk about when you talk about tools, or because one of the questions I was going to ask before is obviously you don't just evolve into this role. This is a role that I imagine requires continual learning and upskilling. That's an absolute given. So I don't imagine I could ask you what course or degree should somebody be going to do if they want to move into this field, because I imagine the array of that must be vast, right? Or is there still a basic start here and then find your path, or is it just so random?
Yeah, it tends to be quite random. I have met so many ex-circus performers since I've been in cybersecurity. And while that may sound kind of weird, it's literally true. Cybersecurity tends to be a career in many instances where it's better if you transition into it from something else. It's not something that I feel that you can just go to straight out of high school through university, do cybersecurity, and really expect to be paid this massive salary. It doesn't work like that. There are certain roles within cybersecurity that are, I would suggest, suitable for those early stage career individuals. But cybersecurity, for what I see in the industry, is the most successful people are those that have come from some other background with that wealth of knowledge from other sort of industries, verticals, other roles, and they bring those skills. And we talk so often about transitional skills into cybersecurity, and those transitional skills can be anything. Nurses make wonderful security operations team members because they are fantastic at not basically getting in a panic under pressure, or they're also extremely good at things like triage. So those skills are very valuable. You also get people with excellent customer service skills, those who come from perhaps backgrounds where they've understood risk or the human factors. Teachers also, we see a lot are coming into cybersecurity. Also, you get then the technology people, but they typically will stay in a technology lane often and focus on those areas. A little bit like myself, I've been very lucky that I have been exposed more broadly since I've been at Cyber Audit Team, but other organizations I would have been very much put into just a technology role and not been exposed to the other facets of cybersecurity. And so it's interesting. I think like you mentioned, we hear this stat about 30,000 individuals required. A lot of it is you can't just put someone through university, in my opinion, and find 30,000 people straight out of university into roles. A lot of the cybersecurity roles that are very junior, they're not going to, it's going to be a challenge because they're going to be quite specific. And a lot of these roles also, I fear, will be taken by AI, particularly some of these junior roles. I think there's definitely a place for a cybersecurity degree, but it's also not the only way into cybersecurity. It depends. And I think this is about understanding what sorts of roles there are out there. I would suggest for some people that perhaps doing maybe a teaching degree and be a teacher for a while and then transition, doing IT for a while and then transition to cybersecurity. There's a million different ways you could go, but I think those are the people that find the most success because typically organizations are looking for someone perhaps a little bit more maturity and a bit more skill in different areas. and also having that emotional intelligence. Not always, but there is not a lot of junior entry-level roles into cyber.
Okay. Funnily enough, my first ever client as a career consultant was somebody, mature age person, who was the same age as me. So he was in his 40s, and yep, he was moving into cybersecurity. So, and funnily enough, one of my most recent clients, whose background had been in admin and as a dental practice manager, went, I want to get out of this and I'm really interested in cybersecurity. How do I get there?
Yep.
So,
Yep. And they're the sort of
that's it.
people that I'm finding, transitioning.
Okay. And then you also mentioned something that I would have asked eventually, which is AI, and how much of an impact do you think that will have?
I think we're always going to need actual people, and while I know that some roles will disappear, I suspect things like security operations, certainly junior level staff, will be all those alerts about something weird happening in the system, are all going to be handled by AI for the most part, or at least the number of people doing those roles will diminish. Likewise, you mentioned people doing coding. That I feel is something that also is not going to be in high demand. What I think will happen, though, a bit like other massive technology changes we have seen, is that there will be new jobs and roles that we can't even imagine now. And I think that will be what is going to happen. And I think this is around people being open to change. My career path looks nothing like what it did last year, the year before that. Every single year, my career has been entirely different. It's always, as you said, constantly learning, constantly challenging myself to learn something new daily. And so if you're a person that likes to do the same thing forever, this is not a career for you. You have to be constantly driving and learning. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. But I think it's going to be a real pivot, and a lot of people are going to be pivoting. Like, for example, I've had to become a pretty good prompt engineer, but I also know my AI skills are probably still way behind where they need to be. So I'm also working on upskilling to start learning how to build AI agents and those sorts of things. Because if I don't keep up with it, somebody will bypass me, and that's where my risk is in my career. I also am very glad that I am where I am so far in my career, because I also know that with my current blended role, I could also go more into the people management side and step back a little bit from the technology. But I think anyone that's starting to get into this now, it's actually a really exciting time. And so while, yes, some of the roles will disappear in the short term, I feel there's massive opportunities coming.
You're right in terms of that evolution. And I think I've said in every podcast, AI won't replace you, but somebody who can use it will. I feel like it doesn't matter who you are or what you do now. If you are not embracing AI, you
Mm-hmm.
will very rapidly be left behind. You talk two things. One, you mentioned about how your career has certainly evolved along that path of a bit of chaos theory, a bit of planned happenstances, and you're open and ready for an opportunity, and then one arises and you can just step into it rather than necessarily planning where your career is going to go. And apart from sort of really set professions, I think most people you speak to, that's what happens to them, right? You're in the right place at the right
Yep.
time and an opportunity comes up. So I like to see that happening. Because yeah, not many of us really plan, but it's good
No,
when it
I
works
think
out. And you talked about being able to, if you wanted to step away from the technology side. And I think more and more we're evolving into these more sort of portfolio type careers, or having a much broader range of skills so that you can
Mhm.
pivot a little bit here this way. And then later on, I'm going to do a bit
Yep.
more of this, because that is how the world of work is changing too. People probably, I'm not sure how long it will not just be doing a Monday to Friday job at one place. They'll be doing 2 days here, 1 day hybrid there, 1 day on site there, all for different companies doing different things at each place. So, yeah, that's where we're going. All right. Excuse me. Has there anything that has become harder over time, apart from having to constantly learn something new every day? Although I love
Yeah,
that too,
I guess
but you
that's
know.
I think the hardest thing for me is I have a lot of demands on my time. And I guess part of that has been due to my very intentional becoming visible in cybersecurity. When I came across from even sort of before I left sort of IT, I felt there was a real need there because I was getting fed up with going to so many events and there was just no women. And so I felt that I had to really step out of the shadows and become very, very visible to show women that there was a place in technology for them. And so I really made a very conscious decision to do that, probably coming up about 4 years ago now. Unfortunately, the flip side of that has been that I've kind of become, and I hate to use the phrase, cyber famous. And I get a constant stream of messages, and don't get me wrong, I love it.
People like me.
I know. And so it's so nice when people will come up to me, for example, at a conference, or they reach out on LinkedIn. It's like, I saw this, I watched your webinar. Can you give me some advice? Absolutely love it. But the flip side of that is this constant demand for, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you jump on a call with me? And so I've had to be quite, I sort of feel in a way I'm letting people down. But I found this year I've had to say, I'm sorry, but I can't, I just don't have the time for this. I've got, last year I took in 2 new rescue dogs, and both of them have got some issues. And so my priority now is them. And so when I'm not working, or giving back to the community through various, groups that I'm already involved with, my priority and my own personal time is to spend more time with them, taking them for walk, training them, etc. Because I have to live in the house with them, so an untrained dog is not great. Um, but I think it's that was something I hadn't expected. The fact that I would have to actively say no, because my immediate instinct whenever anybody asks me something is to say yes. But I find that I get to the end of the week and I'm exhausted, and because there's so much going on, and evenings and weekends are all taken up with cyber, and it's just constant. So to this point, I'm now very conscious about, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
I'm glad you do, because I'm also equally glad that you said yes to me, because I was so excited to get you on. But I fully understand that, and I've also been that yes person, because you just want to. Somebody says, "Oh, can you help me with this?" Yes, of course. What can I do? But at some point, you have to set a boundary, and I think often it takes us, if you're naturally that way inclined, it seems to take us quite some time to figure out that no, you have to set a boundary, and unfortunately, you cannot say yes to everybody, even though you want to. So I'm glad that that's working out, and it's not all work. I'm sure your dogs are very happy about that. Can you tell me then, apart from saying yes to everybody all the time, what types of things tend to wear people down in this career or this industry?
I think for most people, I guess particularly for those who have been around a while, it's a constant drain on your attention, alert fatigue, sometimes feeling that this is unsurmountable mountain of things that has to be done, and you feel that it's all urgent. And I think there's real importance about actually just stepping away. You just sometimes have to say, I can't fix all of the things. I don't have the ability to do that. It's not within my control is also a big one I've had to learn. Just saying, I'm sorry, it's not my problem. It's out of scope. It's not something I can help you with. You need to go and talk to somebody else about this. That can be a real drain on people. I think too, for a lot of people, and this is one of the reasons I was quite keen to get out of IT specifically, was the constant on-call, which is draining. And some cyber roles have that. My one does not. I'm very lucky I don't have any after-hours responsibilities. I don't have to work weekends. And so I'm very fortunate in my role that that's not part of it. But I know for some people that can be very difficult, because it's extremely difficult to then to manage other obligations that you've perhaps got going on in your life. And I'm thinking specifically for parents and carers, that can be very challenging.
Is that then, would there be any other reasons then why people who are really capable would leave? Would they be those, or is there anything else that stands out for you, or where people might get stuck?
I think too, you come back to just believing in what you're doing and making a difference. And also I think too, like we've already spoken about, the continuous learning. If you don't give your staff the opportunity to learn and to train, most people in this industry are having to keep up constantly. And if you don't give them the opportunity, there is a real fear that you're going to get left behind. And that for some people, that can make them step away or move on. I've also seen quite a lot of cases of quite significant burnout just through constant demands and people who've literally said, I can't do this anymore, and walked away from the industry that they love completely and not come back to it. And that's very sad.
Indeed. And you also touched on something there too. There are so many professions where, lifelong learning is, I think, I would hope for most people is a given, right? You just have to evolve. But so I know even for me in my industry, to remain a member of the associations that I'm a member of, I have to do obviously a minimum requirement, and it's a decent amount of ongoing professional development anyway. So even if I didn't want to, I would have to. But that can be expensive and it's time consuming. There is not a week that goes by where I'm not sitting on my computer in a webinar at 8 o'clock at night. Literally, that could be several nights and in the middle of the day. And that's okay at the moment because I have the flexibility. But also, if you're in a role and you're chained to your tasks and that training or that webinar occurs in the middle of the day, but you're not allowed to actually take that time out of your workday to sit down and do that, or if employers aren't in any way helping fund your upskilling, I can see where those things that are absolutely almost mandatory can become quite difficult for people. If you don't have the funds all the time, how do you manage that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a real challenge. I've got a certification and I need to do that continuing professional development to maintain that. And I also have to pay quite a significant amount of money. I think it's like several $100s. And I'm lucky my boss gives me the funds to pay for it. And I attend enough events in the evening just through my engagement with the Australian Women's Security Network and SEC Talks. And I run a cybersecurity conference called B-Sides Gold Coast. And so through those, then I can, and other conferences I attend, I get my hours, no problem. Bit of mentoring thrown in. And so that's not that onerous. But for others not in that situation, I don't have children, but I know that is a particular struggle for parents. Where do they fit this in their day? If their workplace does not give them, as you say, the time to do it within their existing working
My son
environment.
is an expert egg maker, I can tell you. So, sorry, got a webinar. And he just says, oh, it's fine, I'll make eggs.
Yep.
All right. So what then determines progression in this field, apart from obviously having to keep on top of all of those things? Are there any...
Yeah.
I know you've touched on a lot of things, but is there anything for you that really stands out as this is the thing that's going to help you progress?
I think it comes down to the continual learning, and I would say making sure you build your network, because your network is where you're going to go when you need to move on, find opportunities as well. Sometimes they just come your way. And when I say opportunities, I don't necessarily just mean job opportunities, but opportunities perhaps for some training or somebody that connects you to somebody else for whatever reason that might be. And so for me, those two things have been really important. And I think too, just being very determined about being the best you can be at whatever your role is, taking pride in it, also for me has been really beneficial. I always want to be better than what people expect of me, which is a challenge in itself because I'm very hard on myself too when I'm not better than, or if I make a mistake, that is also something I have to work on. I shouldn't beat myself up.
We're good at beating ourselves up, not so great at being gentler at times when needed.
No.
I'm glad that you mentioned your networks, though, and networking, because every client that comes to me, whether it's someone in my business or when I've worked in university, I cannot literally, and this is a very blunt term, I cannot stop banging on about networking. Anyone that comes to me trying to say, can you help me with my resume or my LinkedIn? Because I'm just really not landing interviews. And I ask them about their networks and they don't do any networking. So that for me is almost that's the first thing I start with. Because so many jobs today, your chances of getting a job through a network or a referral are far greater than getting a job off Seek or some other job board.
Yes.
And people really have to understand that. It's just vital. So I'm guessing I was going to ask what gives someone the advantage, but I imagine those things are what will give you the advantage is that drive to keep learning,
Absolutely.
wanting to improve, creating those networks so that when opportunities come up, you're in a position to be able to put your hand up and say, yes, I'm going to take that one. I'm going to ask this question. You've touched on it, and obviously it came up in your bio. what does success look like beyond the job title? And even just personally for you,
Oh,
maybe
that's
not
a
necessarily in the industry, but what does success
success.
look like for you?
I think for success for me is the satisfaction of job well done.
Mhm.
And it means that success also means for me being able to go home at the end of the day and not stress about work.
Yeah.
I tend to take work very, very much as part of who I am.
Good.
Um, yeah, if you meet me, it's like, oh, who are you? Well, I'm a security operations manager at Cyber Audit Team. It's who I am. And I am very dedicated to what I do. Um, but at the same time, I also know that for me to continue to see that as success, I also have to look after myself. So enough sleep, enough exercise, enough me time, essentially. Um,
Yep.
and I think that for me is success. And I think also too, I have really enjoyed, more so than I ever imagined, the connections with others in the community. I think that too, being seen as a leader has been very humbling. Winning those awards has been like completely out of the blue and unexpected. That was never my intention. I just wanted to show women that there was a place for them here and that they were welcome and I could help them get into these spaces. And I feel that I've been pretty successful in that. First time I went to SEC Talks on the Gold Coast, I believe I was the only woman in the room. And usually there's around 50 or 60 people there. Now, regularly each month, we get probably around a quarter to a third women attending.
Great.
And so I feel that's a massive success. Women that now feel comfortable and confident to walk into those spaces and feel that they belong there, that's amazing. And likewise, on the converse, being one of the founding members of the Australian Women's Security Network for the Gold Coast chapter, getting that chapter off the ground where we regularly have anywhere from probably around 100 regular people turn up, men and women. And so that has also been, I believe, a success, because until then there wasn't really any space for women in security on the Gold Coast. And now we have people that don't just turn up to events, but literally are meeting up with each other outside of that because they've built those bonds, connections, networks, and friendships. And I love meeting with these people, and especially seeing some of the students come in now from likes of the local universities. That means that word is getting out there, and being told that they felt welcome and that they were included right from day one is like, yeah, that's success for me.
Yep. And it's amazing how much those types of groups, whether they're industry specific or not, can really bolster you and just enable you to meet and connect and collaborate with people or find mentors. I joined a group last year and it has just been phenomenal. I didn't go today because I'm here doing this, but it was a once a month, and now we've even gone. And I think in the whole, you might actually even be in that group. It's the Gold Coast Professionals Hub. I'm
Yes,
not sure. I love these people, and everybody there just wants to see everybody else do well and thrive.
that's so cool.
Half of the people are
Hmm.
in there technically are in competition with each other business wise, but nobody sees it that way. They're all just throwing in ideas. How did that work for you? What are you doing? And it's just so again, I really cannot shout loud enough about how important these things are for people. All right, enough of me. What kind of challenges do you think actually people in this role tend to enjoy rather than get stressed out by? Because when we talk about challenges, it's
Uh,
usually, oh, what's the hard thing? But what are the things that are challenging that people really
yep.
rise to the occasion and get invigorated by?
I love solving puzzles. So if I get a very difficult technical issue, whether that's a security investigation or something, some sort of technology issue that needs investigation, and I've got to trawl through logs and find information and figure out what the problem is, I love that. Um, I literally like live for that because to me, it's so hard sometimes, and you spend hours, but the satisfaction at the end of that, we're like, found it. I actually belong beyond a shadow of a doubt have proven that this, and this has happened. That is very, very, it fills me with like, oh my gosh, I get like a real buzz from it. I guess it's the endorphin rush.
That's
um,
great. And that's that real sense of flow, right? Flow doesn't come unless you're
yeah.
actually being challenged. You don't get
Mm,
into a state of flow from something that's easy. right? You need to be challenged for it to be a rewarding thing where you just
Yep.
get lost in, you'd lose 5 hours to something because you were just so engrossed in it. Oh, I love that.
Yep.
I was going to ask a couple of questions that you've been so in depth and you've really kind of covered them off already. So those kinds of things of what's kept you in this profession. I do have one though. Is there anything that's only sort of really become rewarding after the length of time that you've been here? So something that you might not
I
necessarily
th-
see earlier on?
I th- I think now it's probably a bit naughty to say it, but when we get a lot of our customers have got IT providers, and they will often blame the security configuration or the security tooling for a specific IT issue. I think because I have so much experience in IT, and I've like 25, 30 years in IT, going back to trawling through the logs and proving beyond a shadow of a doubt it has nothing to do with security tooling, and they have missed something so fundamentally obvious, and I can prove it. That for me, it's a bit naughty saying it, but that, but I guess that's my skill. So I don't know. I just feel that sometimes on the face of it, some of the people we deal with underestimate my technical experience. And I guess part of that is they do not expect a woman to be in a technical role and one to have so much probably longevity and ability to do what they haven't probably quite figured out yet or haven't gone down to the level of detail. So after many, many years of reading logs, I can find stuff pretty quickly. So
It's a shame that you've said that people don't expect that, but I'm glad that you're able to surprise them. I like that.
it's pretty, yeah. People often make assumptions. Even just the other week, I went to an event and someone said, "Oh," and I was wearing the conference T-shirt for the conference I organised, and someone said, "Oh, did you win that?" And it's like, "No, I'm one of the organisers."
Oh, goodness. One day, we live in hope, right? Um, you've given me a lot of things, but is there anything that this career has given you, apart from, the lovely accolades and all that, that you didn't expect?
I didn't expect to love it so much. I didn't expect to have that immense passion for not just the job, but for the community and the actual industry itself. I go to cybersecurity conferences now. I've got like several coming up over the next. I've got one coming up this month, and several coming up over the next couple of months. I cannot wait. When people sort of look forward to going on holiday, I'm looking forward to going and spending my weekend at a cybersecurity conference, because it's it's so many things that I get out of it. I learn new things. I get to catch up with people that I've met previously. It's a wonderful social engagement for me. I'm not a particularly social person. It's not my natural tendency to get out and meet people. I have to force myself to go to events. The only reason I go is because I'm organising them. And so for me, my instinct is to sit at home and not talk to anybody. But I get such a buzz out of it when I really kind of get out, and it's getting out of my comfort zone. So I think that's been a real surprise for me. I hadn't really expected that. I'm not a social butterfly, but sometimes I'm like, where does this even come from?
That's good. I love that we get you get those surprises, something that you didn't think,
Yeah.
and especially when it pushes you out of your comfort zone. And then sometimes I
Mm.
think that's where we actually find some of the greatest pleasure, right? Because it's like, oh,
Yep.
I just don't want to do that thing. And then when you actually do it, it
Yep.
just it can be all encompassing and thrilling, and that's probably why it is. Because if it was easy for you, right?
Exactly. And
Oh,
again,
goodness
I
gracious.
find it fun because I like to do the hard things. So for
Excellent.
me, it's
I
hard to
love
get out
that. I
there and
love
go
all of
to an
this. Oh
event.
my goodness. um, so I was going. This seems like a bit of a moot point, but when you weigh the costs and the benefits, what makes it worth it? I think I know the answer, but just to state the obvious.
There are no costs to this. I just love it. It's just I could
Excellent.
not have picked a better career for myself. I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, I look back and sometimes, and you're having a bad day, and you're like, oh, I wish I wasn't doing this job. And then all of a sudden, the problem is solved in whatever way, and you're suddenly like, nailed it. Job well
Excellent.
done.
I like that you said there were no costs, because before you were talking about not being able to switch off from it, or it's there's so
Yep.
much and there's so many things and you can't be everything to everybody. But the fact that you say there's no cost to me shows that, how great and obviously what a fantastic fit this is for you, because despite
Yep.
all of that, you don't actually see any of that as an issue. So
No,
that,
I just deal with it. It's just a temporary inconvenience that you put plans into action. I'm a planner, but
I'm a
I know
planner.
that the demands on my time are easy. I just need to be strong and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. And so then that's immediately I've got some time now to breathe, to do the thing. And sometimes it's stressful. I will say that sometimes my job, I've like 1,000 things to do in my queue. How am I ever going to get to these? One at a time. How do you eat an elephant? It's that kind of process. If I get really swamped and overwhelmed, it's my boss that I need to go and have a chat with. He can affect change or help me to see that this thing really doesn't matter. Focus on these two things and the rest of it will fall into place. And it's like, yeah, okay, sometimes you just need that voice of reason when you're a little overwhelmed.
I think you've already very much given away the type of people that are going to thrive in this type of environment. Who should not choose this career?
I don't know there's really anyone that shouldn't, because there's so many different roles in cybersecurity. And I know we've talked about communications, but there are so many different ways to communicate with people. And so it doesn't need to be verbal. Maybe you're a non-verbal person and you can communicate with people via some technology, or perhaps you're not physically able and you're a wheelchair user and you can do a desk-facing position. I'm
Fantastic. I'm so glad you said that.
yeah, I'm not great on I would like to say service desk and phone calls. I find that a bit stressful. Um, and I think it's because I do live with hearing loss. So now understanding that I was probably really struggling to communicate and hear sometimes, because the hearing loss for me has been more recent. But now I've got hearing aids. It's great. I just struggle with a phone call. They don't really work for me unless it's Bluetooth on my mobile, in which case perfectly fine. um, so I think there's all sorts of scope for different people and different backgrounds depending on what their interests are. And I think find what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Anyone that's not passionate about it, go find another job. I don't think too it really fits well with people that are inclined to be a bit passive, or a bit sort of, I don't want to say the word, but lazy, because you really, if you're late, that's where your risk's going to be. You can't, if you don't spot the alert, if you don't try and progress things, it stagnates. I would suggest that, yeah, that perhaps is not a good career choice at that point.
Okay. And it's interesting too, you mentioned, so you talked about the hearing issue with you, but then how you get around that. So for me, I've been completely deaf in one ear my entire life. And there are things that I can't do just purely because even as a career consultant, so I volunteer my time at career expos. I love doing that. I love it so much because you never know who's coming. You get 15 minutes and there's 20 people just waiting, but I find them really difficult because they're very noisy environments. And even though I'm
Yep.
sitting
Yes.
2 feet away from somebody, it is so difficult for me to hear them. And
Yep.
especially then when you get dealing with people in cultures who speak very quietly. And then I deal with lots of
Yep.
people who very often they cover their mouths because that's just that's a
Yep.
cultural thing. And if I can't hear them and I can't lip read, I can offer real no value to them. So
Yep.
I like how you've mentioned about understand where your strengths lie, even in the physical things that you can and can't do, and just wiggle around those. If you can't do this, you might still be great at this aspect of this job.
Yep.
So yeah, and that comes with trial and error too, right? You're not
It
necessarily going to
does.
know until you try something.
Hmm.
I've been loving this conversation, but I'm so conscious of the time. We're just about to rack up 60 minutes already. So I just have a couple of really quick questions for you. Um, what was the best career advice you ignored at first, but then realized later was right?
Ooh, career advice. I ignored it first. I think the career advice I ignored at first was you can't do it as you're a woman. I've had people literally say, oh, no, this is not the right career choice. No, women don't do that technology. I've had people say, do you know what you're doing? Of course I do. They don't hire idiots. So I think,
You can slap
yeah,
that.
anything that Pretty much. That's frowned upon, apparently. I'm not allowed to do that either.
Okay. I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway because it's been the same answer almost for every guest, and I really want to drive it home. What's the skill that's helped you more than any qualification?
Communication skills and people skills.
I'd be surprised if you didn't say that.
Yeah.
If you had to start again tomorrow, what would you focus on first?
Building my network. Without a doubt. I think that was something I never did early in my career. I've only really done that in the last 5 years or so. And I think that's probably would have given me even more opportunities if I'd done that more quickly.
Absolutely. That is one of the best things I've heard on here because, like I said, I drum it into people all the time, and it's something that we tend to never really think about until we're 10, 15 years in, or we want to make a change or whatever's happened, and then we start to think about it. So that is a spectacular answer. This isn't necessarily related to your profession as such, but if you were giving advice to your 18-year-old self today, what would you tell Paula to try sooner?
I think I'd just tell myself to be more confident and to believe in myself. That whatever I bring to the table is enough. Yep.
I think so many of us suffer from that, don't we? We're probably far more capable than we believe ourselves to be until somebody pushes us or necessity drives us, and then we go, I can do that.
There's been so many times where someone, like my boss, said to me in different roles, can you do this? And the answer is, never tried it, but let's give it a go. And you don't know what you're capable of until you do. Yeah. One of the awards I got a couple of years ago was for running a thing called the Cyber Skills Enrichment Program. I had no experience in running a program for bringing graduates into the industry, but ended up winning an award. So, you can have a crack at anything.
I love that message, and I'm a bit like you. I've shifted industries and moved into something completely unknown, and somebody says, "Can you do this?" Exactly same answer. I go, "I don't know, but I'll have a go." It's the ongoing challenge. What fills you up? What keeps you energized? And this conversation has been truly energizing. I've been just had to bite my tongue the whole way through. I wanted to just go, yes, every time you say something. But it is one thing I've learned in filming a podcast. I actually need to be completely silent. Otherwise, I have to try and edit everything out that I'm muttering or mumbling in the background. It's very difficult today. Paula, it has been my absolute joy to have you today. I'm so appreciative that you gave up your precious time because I know that people are pulling you in every direction. And I hope I actually get to bump into you somewhere where technically we're so close.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy.
My pleasure, Terry. Thanks for the time.
Before we wrap up today, here are 3 key takeaways from our chat with Paula. Firstly, cybersecurity is not just about tech, it's about people, process, and communication. One of the biggest myths Paula challenged is that cybersecurity is just coding, hacking, or sitting behind a screen dealing only with technology. Her reality was very different. Yes, technical knowledge matters, but so much of the job is actually about communication, report writing, problem solving, translating risk for customers, and helping people understand what needs to happen and why. She made the point that cybersecurity is not just an IT issue, it's a whole of business risk issue. And that is really important because it means that this field is broader and more accessible than many people assume. Secondly, the skills that matter most are often the human ones. What really stood out in this conversation was that Paula's edge was not just technical capability, it was her ability to communicate clearly, build trust, work with customers, follow process, and connect the dots between technical issues and human understanding. She described herself as the glue in project teams because she could translate what the technical specialists were saying into language customers could actually understand. That is a powerful reminder that so-called soft skills are not secondary. In many careers, including highly technical ones, they are often the thing that helps people progress the fastest. And finally, Careers in cybersecurity are rarely linear. Networks, curiosity, and adaptability matter more than a perfect plan. Paula's career was not a neat, pre planned ladder. She started in business computing, worked in libraries and IT, moved countries, shifted roles, built experience over time, and eventually moved deeper into cybersecurity. She also made the point that many successful people in cyber come from other backgrounds, including teaching, nursing, customer service, and other industries, because they bring valuable, transferable skills. Her advice was clear: keep learning, build your network early, and stay open to opportunities. In a field changing this quickly, adaptability is more valuable than trying to map out every step in advance. If there's a role that you'd like to hear about on the show, please leave a comment below and we can follow that up. If you are enjoying the content, please like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on future shows. And of course, share this information with anybody who could benefit from hearing it. Thank you very much for joining me this week. And remember, you can't be what you can't see. So until next time, always be curious.